Good morning. It's May 30th, 2022. Welcome to Triggered. You wouldn't know it's the end of May. I don't know, around my place, the leaves are just starting to come out. This global warming has led to one of the coolest springs I can remember in decades. Either way, it is getting better. It was kind of a nice weekend. Maybe eventually we'll get into some livable temperatures out here. So the weekend behind me for our American cousins. Hopefully the weather's good down there. This is Memorial Day for our American friends down there. They're having a long weekend. It's a big one. They don't quite match their May long weekend with our Victoria Day sort of thing, but it's the good spring one when people get out. Everything starts opening up. You start opening campgrounds and summer facilities and things like that. I always look forward to it. I got to say, a whole lifetime in Canada, 4 years working in the Arctic, and I still hate winter with every essence of my being. But what can you do? All right, getting on to the less serious observations, but they're still important ones. It's International Hug Your Cat Day. So you don't want to forget that. If you've got a cat that is unlike the one that miserable beast I have in my house that would rip my eyes out if I tried to hug it, give yours a hug. Show your appreciation for whatever the hell cats do for you. A lot of people like those things. That one in my place, whatever, it just lives there. But it is International Hug Your Cat Day. Don't forget that. And it's National Hamburger Day. That's one I can embrace. So get out there, enjoy that incredible fine sandwich. I mean, there's not too much to call Canadian or American or North American foods, but hamburgers are kind of a real thing of ours in the West. We certainly have enough fast food places and restaurants supplying them. All right, on to the other stuff. This is a live show, just reminding everybody, the comments are welcome. I see a few coming in already. Good to see all you guys there checking in. And the interactivity is something I really enjoy on this show. Get in there, get those questions in, chat with each other, send things my way. I might not read them all out, as I said, but I do see them all, and it does help frame the discussion. That's what makes being live worthwhile. And I got a couple of, we just got to keep it somewhat civil. Don't have to agree with every guest or agree with me for that matter, but let's try to be somewhat nice to each other, because you know how grouchy I get when the comments tick me off. Either way, so we got a couple of good guests on. Jay Hill, I believe he's going to come in person. He's going to be on the show today. He was a member of Parliament for 17 years with Reform and then the Canadian Alliance and all those things. He was the interim leader of the Maverick Party for some time, and now he's out of that, so he's officially retired and can come in and talk to us about federal issues in general. So that'll be a good conversation because there's a lot going on. Then I'm going to have our Western Standard BC reporter, Reid Small, coming in with some updates from BC on a number of stories. He always gets a lot of these good ones, because BC is just the land of woke lunacy. So, I want to talk to him about a few, like Vancouver gas stations. Sounds like they're going to be punished and have to be fined essentially $10,000 a year if they don't install the extremely expensive electric charging stations that nobody's going to use on their place, or a large meth bust from an Albertan heading out that way. So we'll talk to Reid about a bit of that stuff and catch up on the BC issues. As I said, with Western Standard, we cover across the West, actually across the country, but Reid is our person on the ground in BC. All right, let's see what's got me going today. I often get my inspiration as I drive in. So as I tormented myself with local talk radio during my morning commute to the office today, I heard an ever so familiar story. The Alberta Medical Association is sounding the alarm bells due to a shortage of doctors in the province. Yes, the emergency rooms are filling up with patients with minor ailments due to a lack of family doctors in many areas. Of course, throughout the story, it was implied that the hostile UCP policies have caused doctors to flee the province for other jurisdictions, and we have to spend more money. They use the term invest, of course, but it's spend, and we have to spend it right away if we're going to stop this problem. The lack of doctors is indeed a concern. Healthcare is always the top issue in provincial elections, and it appears that things are getting worse. Is it really because of the UCP, though? Now, so in doing a short search of the term doctor shortage, province by province, news stories in every province sounded exactly the same. Every province in Canada is running low on doctors, in fact, in health professionals in general. If Alberta's UCP is indeed driving medical professionals out of the province, they apparently aren't going to the other provinces. It is believable that many of them are leaving the country for greener pastures, though. The world market for medical professionals is competitive. Many countries with less restrictive healthcare systems than ours have been actively headhunting for medical professionals here. So can we pay enough, though, to keep medical professionals from leaving? Labor makes up the majority of healthcare spending, a lion's share of it. Even small salary increases across the board could blow up a healthcare budget. And while there still might be room to compensate healthcare professionals more, we can only spend so much. Are we spending enough on healthcare, though, in general? Well, if you listen to unions and public health care advocates, you think we're not. No, it sounds like we're starving them. But the budget statistics tell a different tale. Healthcare spending's been steadily increasing in every province in Canada for years. Spending spiked in the last 2 years due to the pandemic, of course. In 2021, the national per capita amount being spent on healthcare was $8,019. That's in 2021. 10 years prior to that, in 2011, it was $5,806. It's almost a 40% increase over 10 years. We can't sustain that spending trajectory. We can't pretend that we aren't spending enough on healthcare. In spending that much per capita, Canada spends more on healthcare than most countries in the developed world, yet our outcomes are lagging by just about every measure. Access is abysmal, and people are literally dying on waiting lists. Medical specialists in particular are in short supply everywhere. So if we can't spend our way out of the problem, maybe it's time we stop trying to and examine the system itself. See, there's where the problem comes in. Canada's created a mythology around its healthcare system and spent decades tirelessly telling us we have the best system on earth. The CBC dedicated an entire game show to determining who the best Canadian ever was, and it was handily won by Tommy Douglas for founding our healthcare system. Whenever anybody dares to question the system in Canada, they're labeled as a blasphemer, and horror stories of the heartless American system are sure to follow. What the stalwarts defending the status quo with Canada's healthcare system refuse to acknowledge is there's hundreds of healthcare systems on earth, and dozens of them offer universal coverage better than we do and for less money. We can't let people keep shouting down any discussion of systemic reform if we want to see improvements. Anybody who's been in a position of employing people knows that while good compensation levels are essential in retaining good staff, the work environment itself is critical as well. If people are stressed, underappreciated, or overwhelmed, they're going to leave. And this is happening in healthcare. And since spending more money won't fix it, we need to change how we do it. It only makes sense. It's hard to say, though, how bad it's going to have to get before people are ready to pursue changes to the system. But when we double health spending, when our waiting lists truly become the longest on earth, we're on a trajectory to meet both of those metrics right now. Sustainability is a popular buzzword these days. Well, let's apply it to our healthcare system and add a dose of reality. Our system right now is rigid, inefficient, and unsustainable, and we need to make radical changes to it. Until we do, those healthcare headlines that look the same across the country about the shortages won't be going away anytime soon. So that's what's got me going today. Let's see what else is going out there in the news with our news editor, Dave Naylor. Hey, Dave, how's it going?
Good morning, Cory. How was your weekend?
Well, it was pretty good, actually. Got a lot of stuff done around the house, the yard. Always busy.
I hear you had some more nocturnal visitors.
I did. We got a little black bear hanging around the place now and a bobcat walking back there. So, yeah, the game cam has been busy this week.
Yeah, so you got, what have we seen now? Cougars, bears, bobcats. It's you got a veritable zoo in your backyard.
Yeah, it's been busy this year. It was kind of quiet through the winter. We usually see a few cougars, and there was nothing for months. And then this last month and a half, everything's on the move. They're coming around. Not causing any problems so far anyways. We still have all our house pets, except even that bloody cat of mine.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Duke the Wonder Dog will keep you well protected from those things.
I'm certain he will, or at least he'll give us warning as he's running through the dog door away from whatever's back there.
There you go. Well, let's take a look at what's going on in the news. The world's most famous painting, the Mona Lisa, was defaced this morning by a climate change lunatic who came into the Louvre dressed as an elderly woman and in a wheelchair, and got up and screamed and threw cream pie at the Mona Lisa. So fortunately, it's behind glass, so no damage done to Da Vinci's masterpiece. Other stuff, we've got BC hospitals forced to close over the weekend due to staff shortages. And Reid Small's got that story, and sure he can fill you in more on when he's on the show. We've got Trudeau's chief of staff, Katie Telford, was hosted by a federal contractor, Reuters Thompson, down in the social event of the year in Washington, D.C., the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We've got a report showing drug dealers are making a ton of money ever since the government privatized cannabis. They're basically selling way more stuff than the government is. I guess they can sell it cheaper. More fallout continues over the Supreme Court ruling on Friday that multiple murderers basically get the same 25 years as even people that kill only one person. So we've got some political reaction, the Tories and the NDP teaming up unusually for this one, and they're venting their anger. Our Mike Thomas, real estate expert, has got a column saying Bank of Canada is going to raise their interest rates on Wednesday, no doubt about it. A panel of 30 experts all agreed. There was not a single dissenting voice that said they weren't going to. We've got more big news to come this afternoon. Cory out of Ottawa, the report into sexual misconduct within the military is being released, and it's very damning to say the least. And we've got the big story at 2:30 Mountain Standard Time. The Trudeau Liberals are bringing back their new gun laws. So we'll see what's in that for us. All the people that legally own guns, I'm sure it'll be a bit lots of problems. So yeah, those two major ones coming this afternoon, Cory.
Great. Yes, lots on the go and lots coming. It looks like, we're getting to that season where legislatively they're going to start mashing everything in before their session ends. So we can probably see a few beauties coming down the line in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, the politicians have to get their holidays in. So yeah, it's going to be fun and games.
All right. Well, thanks for the check-in. We'll check in with you again after the show. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, Cory.
That's our news editor, Dave Naylor, with, yes, quite a rundown. As we said, there's a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stories that are going up on the site, and we are busy. We watch things as they break and get them up there. So just that reminder to everybody. Well, first, I want to thank everybody who's already subscribed. That's how we can do this. That's how we keep a great news editor like Dave out there. I don't want to let his head get too big, but he does a hell of a job in there. And, of course, that whole raft of reporters that he has to manage to make sure we're putting out good content. The reason we can do that is because you guys are subscribing, and you guys have been doing great coming in for us. So I'm guessing we must be doing some things right. If you haven't subscribed already, though, guys, get on board. Check it out. westernstandard.news/membership for $99 a year, $10 a month if you want to go month by month. It's less than a newspaper subscription used to cost you, 20 years ago to get it delivered to your door, and you get a better product coming straight to you. We're not asking for charity. You're not asking for tax funding. We won't take it under any circumstances. But this is how we can do it, guys. We sell a product, and we appreciate you taking part in it. So get on there, check it out, and see about taking out a subscription with the Western Standard. Again, so yeah, we got some crazy stuff going on up there. Interest rates going up again. There's one that's going to be interesting to watch coming on Wednesday. But we did, as Dave said, the experts are constantly coming up and saying it's going to happen. I mean, we know this is going to happen. When inflation goes mad, that's the only tool the central bank really has to try and get it under control. For those of us gray enough in the muzzle, and I'll be getting to another one in a moment, to remember the 80s and 90s as they tried to do inflation control through nothing but interest rates. We ended up in some terrible recessions thanks to double-digit interest. We're going to be into a seesaw cycle of some economic misery for a while right now. I'm going to speak about one of our advertisers before I get to our guest quickly, I guess, and that is Bitcoin. Well, speaking of currency, speaking of getting away from, central banking, well, a lot of people are looking at digital currencies. It's new, it's different. It's also has some people nervous. You're never sure, it's your money. You've worked hard for it. Is it worth investing in? How do you get involved in it? How do you set up a wallet? That's what these guys are about. They're a Western Canadian company. They're publicly traded. They're reputable. I mean, that's the thing. You want to make sure that you are talking to somebody. I mean, it seems like everybody is trying to rip you off. Every email that comes in is somebody trying to take more money out of you. Another scam, another phone call asking about duct cleaning or something. These guys are the real deal. They're a good Western Canadian company. They'll sit down, personalized one-on-one service to talk to you about Bitcoin and see if it's for you. Maybe it's not. But the main thing is you can talk to somebody trustworthy and see if it's an investment that is right for you. And they've also been a great sponsor for us for quite some time. So be sure to get out there and check these guys out. I mean, it's supporting local, it's supporting yourself, and it may be getting your money out of the reach of those dastardly federal politicians who seem to be always out to take it away from you. Bitcoinwell.com and take control of your money. So let's get on to some federal issues we've got. Mr. Jay Hill, now of no kind of formal title anymore for the first time in a long time. How you doing?
I'm great. Cory, and yourself?
Very good, thanks. Yeah. As I said at the start of the show, I mean, you've had a long history. You were a member of Parliament for, I believe, 17 years. You went through a number of party incarnations. You were the party whip as well in there. Then you were the interim leader of the Maverick Party, but now you're kind of a statesman, I think is the best term I could put for it.
Well, I guess some people are calling me the founder. I guess that's better than flounder, but yeah, I mean, myself and a small group, as you know, got Maverick Party started about 2 years ago. We morphed, if I can call it that, out of the old Wexit Canada Party. We completely changed the philosophy and the mission statement and the principles and the policies and pretty much everything else. And when we formed the Maverick Party about, I don't know, 20 months ago, something like that, less than 2 years ago. So it's been quite a journey, and I've enjoyed it. But now we've handed it over to our new elected leader that the members elected on the 14th, Colin Krieger. And thank you for coming to our event.
Well, no problem. No, I was there to cover it, and I've had Colin on the show to talk with him. It'll be interesting to see how that party develops. And I want to talk a bit about that. I mean, you were involved in, grassroots party development way back from the Reform days. I was a young, long-haired guy knocking on doors for Art Hanger way back then. But it's a lot of work, and it's difficult, and it's hard to gain traction. Right now, and provincially, I've mentioned that before too, because now provincially we're into a federal or a leadership race here. We got 2 leadership races going on. But those really suck the oxygen out of any alternative movements. That's the potential period of renewal for either of those parties. People think they could be reformed, think they could be fixed. And sometimes it does fix a party, sometimes it doesn't. But boy, it really drains the market dry, I guess, for those alternative movements. Yeah,
it certainly sucks the oxygen out of the room, as they like to say. We've got the CPC, the Canadian Conservative Party of Canada, running theirs. Of course, that's been underway for a bit of time now. Personally, I was, very dismayed, I guess, by the fact that they disqualified a number of candidates. I thought it would have been a better open race with more alternatives for Conservative members. Hopefully, that doesn't happen with the UCP race, which is not yet underway. But my understanding is this week they're striking a committee to decide on the rules to replace Mr. Kenney, Premier Kenney. So we'll have to see how that goes. I mean, from my point of view, and it'd be interesting discussion, because you used the word renewal. And I think that both the Conservative Party of Canada and the United Conservative Party of Alberta have quite a task ahead of them in trying to not only win the support and unify their own parties and the membership of those parties, which are incredibly fractured at both levels, but also to attract and unify, in the case of the UCP, Albertans. And my personal belief, Cory, for that to happen is going to take someone with outside, not a recycled politician, not someone from within the current cabinet or the current Conservative structure, but it's going to take somebody from what I used to call the real world, somebody outside of mainstream United Conservatives, because we have to look beyond winning the United Conservative leadership race. I think we have to look towards winning that overused phrase, the hearts and minds of Albertans. Everybody that's a non-socialist should be looking at preventing the return of Rachel Notley.
Well, that's the worst thing that we can see happening from an economic and a number of standpoints. I think David Price, I don't know if you know him, but he's going to be chairing that committee. He's a young fellow. He was involved quite a bit in the Wild Rose in the past, and a very good principled young man. So it's a good sign, because he really sticks to the rules on things that they will come up, because they had so many questions with the last leadership race. The mistrust starts even before you get out of the gates if you have just even questions, whether fair or not, coming out of your process. So hopefully, David and the others will really make sure they've got a bulletproof process. As you said, make sure they let in a broad selection of candidates. It doesn't look like an inside game, because if it looks gamed or rigged, members and voters alike are just going to say, you guys, it's more of the same crap, and they'll reject it.
Well, and you certainly drew attention to that as the party went through all the machinations towards voting, or the reveal of the vote, the mail-in vote for Jason Kenney's support or lack of. And you in particular and Western Standard were at the forefront of drawing attention to all the potential problems that resonated from that. And the fact that if it wasn't done properly with a proper, believable result, then you've only reinforced the distrust of Albertans, and in particular United Conservative members.
Yeah, well, and trust is everything. And I think some of that was lost with Premier Kenney. And personally, I still think they were in a no-win situation. He came in just over 50%. He'd said 50% plus one, but I'm sure in his mind he had a different number. You just have to say that. And clearly that wasn't enough to feel comfortable with a mandate. But as others had said, well, what if he came in with 75%? Well, people say, well, I won't believe it. Well, then he wasn't, there was no winning. You know, that party was unfortunately irrevocably ruptured, but it's the trust thing. So they've got to do this exercise and keep trust this time.
Well, and I think that most of us that have been part of politics, Cory, for many, many years, more years than you and I probably care to admit, recognize that probably what should have happened is Jason should have resigned prior to that. Prior to going through that, because as you say, it was a no-win situation for him anyway, because the trust had been broken for whatever reason, multiple reasons it had been broken. And so you can't win because, as you say, if you had a higher number, higher than Joe Clark's 2/3 or whatever it was in the day, that he decided wasn't sufficient. So if he would have had a higher number, it wouldn't have been believable. And if he came in lower than that, then he was forced to resign anyway. So he probably should have just resigned and started the process 2 or 3 months ago. The party would have had more time before the next election to get a new leader in place and start to build momentum and hopefully unity amongst non-socialist Albertans.
Yeah, well, that unity thing. And so, I mean, I'll pivot a bit to the federal front. We got a race going on there. And as you said, I mean, one of the things we never really did find out exactly why. A couple of those candidates apparently came up with the signatures, came up with the deposits, but the committee just still said, no, we'd rather you weren't taking part in the race, and they disqualified them right off the bat. Again, that it just makes it sound like an inside game, and that really, particularly I think with conservatives, frustrates them pretty fast.
Absolutely, and it should. I mean, it leaves a bad taste in all our mouths when you see, a small little group that forms the committee to run the leadership race of a party. It doesn't matter what party it is, and if they're the ones making the decision of who gets to run and who doesn't, who gets to take their message, their vision to the membership and who doesn't, it doesn't sit well with your rank and file membership. That's going to hurt membership growth, hurt retention of members as they move towards the September voting day. I think, there's going to be memberships, obviously, that will expire between now and September. And when you start to sow those seeds of distrust, it's incredibly hard to build it back.
Oh, yeah. And people will keep bringing it up over and over. And I mean, the other thing is I'm worried about this. It's such a long campaign period they got going, and it's already such a vitriolic campaign. You end up with a solid winner, but you have a lot of people marching out of the room when you've had such a hostile and personal sort of campaign, and they've still got months to go. I'm really worried about what's going to be left of that party, no matter who wins it at the end of this. It's a real concern.
And that's an excellent point. And as we head into the UCP leadership race, to get back to the provincial side of things, Cory, I hope that they learn a bit of a lesson from the federal party and say, we don't want to behave like that. Because as I said, the challenge and the timelines are much, much shorter, and people need to understand that. The timeline to get a leader in place for the UCP and hopefully coalesce that non-socialist Albertan vote behind whoever he or she is very short. As you know, the election is scheduled for about a year from now. By the time we get the new leader in place and, promote that person, that person's vision, hopefully to reunite non-socialist Albertans, it's going to be a very short timeline. Hopefully, unlike what the federal Conservative leader will face after September, there'll hopefully be more time for them to get established and get their profile known and get hopefully convince Canadians to support them. So it's interesting, the juxtaposition between the two races. Can one learn some lessons from the other? Hopefully. Certainly this vitriolic adversity that we're seeing between the supposed front runners at the federal level hopefully will not be transmitted to the provincial race once it kicks off.
Well, yeah, provincially and federally. I see somebody else, mention the PPC, and then of course there's Maverick as well. They can't forget there are others waiting the wings. So if you've got 20% of your membership disgruntled or more after such a personal race, they will go somewhere else, and it's gonna cost you. And likewise in Alberta, we have the UCP, but Paul Hinman, of course, is a very credible person with the Wilders Independence Party out there. He'll welcome frustrated UCP members if they should come about, as with some of those newer parties on the scene. So, they're not forced together for a lack of alternatives. These guys have got to,
especially at the provincial level, as you're saying. Yeah. I mean, I've lost count of how many parties there are that are vying for provincial votes. That's why I say that I think, as someone that really worries for my grandchildren about the potential for a Rachel Notley socialist return to Alberta. I mean, that's why I came out of retirement to start Maverick a couple of years ago. That's why now I'm actually supportive of a sort of a non-traditional conservative candidate for the UCP race once it kicks off. And I'm doing everything I can to encourage Tarek El-Nega, who was one of our leadership candidates for the Maverick Party, and he certainly won a lot of hearts and minds, because what we need, I believe, Cory, is someone that can unite the non-socialist Albertan vote behind the UCP. I mean, whoever wins that is by extension going to be the premier, at least for a short period of time till the next election campaign. And so what we need is someone that projects beyond conservatives, social conservatives, fiscal conservatives, red Tories, progressives, whatever.
The elusive Big Tent.
Exactly. Yeah. And because a lot of folks out there that vote do not vote along party lines. They're looking for someone new, someone that can bridge the gap between rural and urban, someone that can expand the UCP appeal way beyond the conservative base to include libertarians and others. That might be attracted to a new face, a fresh face with some fresh ideas for Alberta.
Well, that's what I'm seeing. Like I see Sarah Lindquist, some of the names we're seeing already, say Peter Guthrie, Todd Lowen, or Danielle Smith are the best bets. And there's a number of other names coming up. So far, it's just been Danielle Smith and Brian Jean who have formally declared. We're looking at perhaps some cabinet members coming out. As you said, we're always saying we want a fresh face. But boy, it's tough if you don't have the network and the party mechanisms and the connections.
And the money. Of course,
to crawl through that. But I mean, I also see that same appetite with what we're seeing right now as retreads. And I don't like to knock. I love Danielle. I think she's fantastic, but I'm not sure if she's going to be able to win that. And, Jean's been and gone. And I would say somebody like Tarek or another like that.
Right.
How do you break through that wall and climb the ranks? People want that, but at the same time, it's very difficult to win.
It is. Although I do believe, and I'm by far not a digital guru by any stretch, Cory. I don't know how proficient you are with social media, but I'm told, and I take some heart from the Freedom Convoy. They raised $10 million twice, and they reached tens of thousands of people with a very simple message. And they stayed on message, my good friend Tamara Leach. So I think there is hopes in today's day and age that wasn't there when you and I were building parties.
Well, that's part of it too, absolutely. Like way back with Reform, for example, I mean, you had to work the ground. You had to literally phone people and nag them. If you caught them at home, they didn't have a cell with them all the time, so you had to bug them during dinner.
Wasn't invented yet.
You were at least not for affordably, and you were. You'd have to door knock. You'd have to do mail-outs. They were expensive. They were time-consuming. I remember volunteer nights, sitting there burning the cigarettes and drinking the beer and stuffing envelopes all night.
Yeah.
There's a lot more opportunity now, though. As you said, a person, if they can, with social media on a relatively low budget, if they can gain that grassroots steam and get things rolling, as you said, like the convoy. Tamara's no master organizer by any means. She just wanted to start a fundraiser for a cause she thought was important, and it went viral. And that can happen with a leadership candidate. But maybe that's part of why the establishment's kind of pushing those alternative candidates to the wayside.
Yeah, that could be. I mean, nobody really knows because the Conservative Party of Canada hasn't really explained to Canadians and Conservative members why they excluded these gentlemen. And to their credit, they didn't want to tear the party apart. So, they didn't launch a legal appeal or whatever. There was talk of that at one point in time. So as I say, hopefully the provincial UCP, which of course we need to, clearly state that they're not directly affiliated, nor is Maverick affiliated with any other party. The reason why I'm pushing Tarek is because I think we need that new blood. We need a vision for all of Alberta, not just for Conservatives. And that's a terrific base to work from. But my fear is that if the party, after whatever date they set for electing the new leader, if the party remains as fractured as it is today, both in the caucus, in the party mechanics behind the scene, the governance of the party, and more broadly with the membership, if it remains as fractured, and some people, as you suggest, Cory, all of a sudden say, well, I don't like the new leader. I think they won by hook or crook or whatever. And so they're going to take their ball and go to a different party or they're going to start a new party, or they're going to splinter, and a big part of the old Wild Rose will join the new Wild Rose Independence. Like, we don't know.
And
we got to keep everybody inside the tent to take on Rachel Notley.
Well, that's it. We keep repeating history. I mean, you were in the caucus back with the whole Conservative Reform Alliance Party split and the things going on federally, and that soured a lot of electors. For those of us, okay, if we're dialed in and we kind of see what's going on, we understand why people are upset. We see what happened, and we're playing the political games within the parties. But we got to remember, the vast majority of the voters are not members of political parties.
Exactly.
And all they see is what
Dissension,
they see, ugly play, and they reject that. So hopefully we can start learning from someone.
And the key there, and I've said this already on the program, is that with the Conservative Party of Canada, I suspect with the unbridled love between Jagmeet Singh and Justin Trudeau, it appears as though Parliament's going to continue to stumble along for a while yet. So they may have time to try to heal those wounds that they're inflicting on each other and on themselves during the race. Mm-hmm. My fear for the UCP is that if it unfolds the same way, where the front runners are sniping at each other all the time, as you say, then there isn't adequate time, because we're looking at an election a year from now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, whoever wins is going to have two battles to do. I mean, they're going to have to unify the party end within there, and then they've got 6 months to convince Albertans, we're what you need. We're the best option for you. That's going to go fast. I mean, that'll give them the better part of one legislative session, get some policy out, I guess, depending on who it is and what they were going at.
And it's over the Christmas break and the calendar year end, and you've got all these other challenges where people's attention is distracted from politics, rightly so, family, things like that. And so that's a pretty short period of time for people like you and I that have been involved in politics, for whoever that new leader is, to do that outreach and to set in place a platform that is going to appeal to a broad range of Albertans and really detract from the popularity, or at least what appears to be the popularity, of Rachel Notley right now.
Well, and they'll have to keep their flank covered. I mean, part of why I think Kenny couldn't campaign effectively on the provincial front was because he was constantly fighting with his own party underneath. And so it'll have to be somebody who can manage.
And that brings up the whole other issue when people are trying to decide whether it's at the federal or at the provincial level, Cory, the issue of leadership. And I've often remarked that those of us that are getting long in the tooth and a lot of gray hair, we understand because we've been through it many, many times. And it's no different in the private sector with a CEO or a chairman of the board or your local supervisor or superintendent or foreman on the job, as it is in politics. You never really know what kind of a leader someone is going to make until they are the leader.
Well, that's it. And there's no real good guidebook for that thing. Like, I've always felt it's inherent. Some people have it in them. It's natural. Yeah. I mean, look for Ralph Klein, for an example. He could pull it together. He really, engaged Albertans. He managed to keep his party together. And I mean, he has challenges, but he didn't have some sort of formal leadership training or something. He had it within him. I mean, Jason Kenney's been an exceedingly effective politician for years and a fantastic cabinet minister, a great opposition member. But when it came to leading, there's just that whole separate skill set that some have and some don't. He just didn't seem to quite have it.
Well, you know, and so many know, because you've taken the time to assess the strengths and weaknesses of leaders, as they say, whether it's private sector or whether it's in politics. And there's so many different necessary facets of leadership. And Jason Kenney might have been great at, by and large, with communicating with the general public, constituents, but was a failure in how he did or didn't keep his caucus united, keep his team together, keep the governing, the members of the governing council or board behind the scenes, because you've got all those different entities, whether it's the internal mechanics of the party, and you've got to be good at all of them. You've got to be good at those personal relationships and building that loyalty. And that really, in the end, separates, I think, out to a large extent, a good leader from a poor one, is whether you can bring your team along with you and build that team spirit, that they feel part of something that's greater than themselves.
And we hope, well, we'll see what comes out of this race. Races are opportunities. I mean, they're really a do or die for parties. So on the federal front, I mean, something I worry a little about as as you said, they've got that coalition between Trudeau and Jagmeet. It might as well be a majority. In fact, a farther left majority than we used to have.
Mhm.
And well, right now, I mean, they're pushing policy. They want to push it before. I mean, while the Conservatives are in turmoil, this is a great time to get some heavy policies shoved through there because they don't have an effective opposition. They're busy fighting with themselves. We're seeing the firearms legislation coming through today. Probably some major changes in that. We're seeing a lot of other the C18, C11, those scary ones talk about controlling information, controlling media. I got a feeling on the federal front that party's going to get away with a whole lot before the Conservatives even get their game behind them.
Well, we'll have to see. I mean, my hope, having been a long-time caucus whip and then House leader responsible for a legislative agenda or resisting a legislative agenda, which is what you're talking about, Cory, is that there's sufficient skilled veteran MPs that are still in that caucus working that will hold this government to account, but will remains to be seen. I mean, there are tools there, and certainly I'm familiar with them, that they can use, parliamentary tools to hold the government in check. We'll see whether they use those. When bills come along that are so clearly in opposition to a large section of Canadian citizenry, like gun legislation. Let's have a look and see what it looks like. What scares me as a legal firearms owner all my life, ever since I was a teenager, which was a few years ago, is that, once again, we have a Liberal Party supported by a Socialist Party that intends to ram through, or certainly leaving the impression they intend to ram through, more restrictions on legal firearms owners when they have never provided the evidence that those are the firearms that are the problem. And I don't believe for a minute they are. When I was in Parliament, we asked continuously for Liberal governments of Jean Chrétien and then Paul Martin to provide evidence of the guns that were used in crimes. How many of those were actually legal guns? And how were they stolen? And were they stolen from owners, responsible firearms owners that had them, in a gun cabinet?
Yeah.
Or, exactly how did that gun get in the hands of a criminal?
Well, let's get stats. I mean, if it turns out that 90% of bank robberies were being committed by duck hunting guns, well, then maybe we should crack down on duck hunting. But there's no evidence of any of that.
Exactly.
So,
and of course, many of us are pretty confident that that's not the case.
No.
That the majority of guns that are used in crime are smuggled in from the United States, where they are so numerous.
Yeah, well, and these Liberals, I can see kind of a danger and an opportunity, I think. Like, this is a Liberal Party like we haven't seen in a long time. Like in the 90s, the Liberals, there were still some blue Liberals in there. There were some common sense MPs in there. If might be gagging a little to admit it, but guys like Dan McTeague or even David Kilgore, who recently passed away, but he was actually a great advocate for Alberta as a Liberal Party member. But those moderate and pragmatic Liberals, you don't see them anymore. This is a hard left party, but I see that as a danger in putting legislation through, but it also could be a force to unite then a common sense conservative movement to unseat these guys.
Opposition, yeah. One of the best examples I've used, Cory, in the past on that front is someone that became a good friend of mine that was from outside of politics, and that's David Emerson. He had built an incredible career in the private sector as a leader, and he really, I don't believe, really intended to enter politics. He got a phone call one day when he was in Vancouver in his office from the Prime Minister at the time, Paul Martin, and said, the country needs you. We need someone like you from outside of politics that only would only do it, would only get involved in politics because of a desire to serve. So all the right reasons. And so David stepped forward. And as you'll recall, there was a huge controversy after Stephen Harper and myself and others orchestrated the defeat of the Liberal government under Paul Martin. And then Stephen made the offer for David Emerson to cross the floor. And actually, I think it's the only time in Canadian history that's happened where a sitting cabinet minister, not just a member of parliament, crossed from a defeated government to the new government and went right into cabinet. What a great thing it turned out to be, though. I mean, I was there in that first parliament as Prime Minister Harper's whip. I worked closely with all the cabinet. And I can tell you what an advantage it was for us to have someone of the stature and the skills and the experience, private sector experience of David Emerson. And, you know, so it was the right decision, a nonpartisan decision to welcome someone like that into the cabinet. And that's why I'm suggesting someone like Tarek El-Nega. I don't know whether Tarek is the be all and end all and will be a great leader or not, but we need someone like that that has the reach beyond the Conservative Party in a nonpartisan way to attract Albertans.
When there's some of that tough irony to have partisan unity at the same time as somebody who can go beyond those lines. I mean, is it a pragmatic floor crossing or is it an opportunistic floor crossing?
Exactly.
There's two different kinds altogether.
Yeah.
Well, lots to watch and lots to cover. Boy, that went fast. But
well, thank you so much, as always, for having me on the show. I'd love to come back and we can talk more.
We can, yeah, because I think there's more to cover and we got a lot unfolding. I really appreciate that voice of experience from in there, because as I said, we keep running in circles on the hamster wheel here, and you know, one of the ways to try and avoid repeating these same mistakes over and over again is to speak with some other folks who've already made some of them, so we can get on to some brand new fresh mistakes instead.
I know I've made my share of mistakes.
Oh yeah, and the successuccesses too. Hey, you know, point out what worked. So great. Well, thanks for coming in, Jay, and I'm certain we'll be talking again soon.
Thanks, Cory.
All right,
I enjoyed it.
Thanks. So yes, that was Jay Hill, again, for pretty much everybody who's been in the West in this last few decades know who Jay is. And it's great having him in. Lots to talk about, lots of party questions, party things to wonder about. Interesting talking about that, yeah, with a floor crossing being a nonpartisan sort of thing. It's interesting because I talk about the other end of it. If you remember Sandra Jansen, everybody had a lot of love to share with her. And she just sort of ran for the doorway. But Sandra Jansen ran for the Progressive Conservatives. She was a very vitriolic and volatile member of the legislature. She ended up running for the leadership, but she couldn't get enough signatures and things to get running. She had Stephen Carter trying to manage her short-lived and divisive campaign. So then she went off in a snit and later on joined Notley's NDP because Notley had a majority. And she said, of course, it's not for a cabinet seat. I'm just doing it because I'm principled. But of course, she was put into cabinet not long after that. And when things started looking rough for the NDP, even though Sandra Jansen said all the way through, I love this party, I support this party, Rachel's great. When it looked bad in the polls, what was it, a month before the last general election, looked like Sandra wasn't actually going to win her seat, she abandoned the NDP without notice and ran for the hills. So there's that kind of politician who crosses the floor. And then there's the ones like Emerson, like Jay pointed out, that, you know, can cross perhaps for the right reasons. It's always our job, and a difficult one, to distinguish between the good and the bad ones, though. And that's why these democratic measures and leaderships just never quite stop. Okay, let's talk about one of our advertisers before I get on some more new stuff. And it cups into an issue that's very big, of course, in the news these days. By the way, I'm looking to speak to Tony Bernardo from them. Hopefully I'll get him on the show again soon. And that's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. These guys, I mean, this is a time when we need a rational discussion about firearms, about legal firearm ownership, and about illegal firearm ownership. You know, we need to have the resources for people, and that's what the CSSA is about. It's for people who want to responsibly use and enjoy firearms, whether you're target shooting, collecting, hunting, any of those things. It's your business, you know, as a law-abiding citizen, to utilize these things. And there's lots of videos for safe use, ideas for things you can do with firearms, resources, trade shows, but they also advocate on your behalf as a firearm owner or one who's considering firearm ownership. And they've done legal challenges and things like that against some of the knee-jerk or ideological legislation that comes from the federal government quite often, particularly on something like firearms. I mean, we saw the horror, the terrible situation in Texas, that tragedy. It was just, it's horrible. And there's been a lot of school shootings, and that's a big issue. And we do, you know, more so the Americans than us, that there has to be discussions on what's going on. And we've got to make sure up here that we don't lose our rights with knee-jerk reactions on the Canadian government's part, taking advantage of American tragedy, because I think that's what's going to happen. When people are emotional, when they're upset, and the Liberals just don't seem to intent to go after criminal use of firearms. They just want to keep going after the law-abiding ones. So either way, the Canadian Shooting Sports Association, that's where you're going to find that rational discussion. That's where you can get a good logical talk on these sorts of things. And again, support your own rights. So check them out, cssa-cila.org. It's the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. You could Google it. take out a membership with them. It's not that much, and it's well worth it, and that helps support them to keep supporting you. So let's see. Let's talk about, here we go, something a little more positive. And this is something that hit the news the other day. A big announcement from the UCP government under Jason Kenney is that dogs are allowed on patios in Alberta. So yes, pubs and patios, you can have a dog on there now. Whatever. It's a good news thing, and why not? It's not going to save Premier Kenney's butt politically at this point or anything. It's sort of mixed, though. I've watched some of the discussion, and some people have points on both sides. If you have for one, if you have allergies and such, you might not want to sit next to a dog. Plus, not all dogs are equal. Not all are equally well behaved. I mean, I've got 3 at home right now, 1 that we're fostering and 2 we've adopted. We've got our big old bulldog. Yeah, she would sit just fine on a patio. Wouldn't bother anybody aside from maybe passing wind. We've got Duke, the wonder dog, as Dave likes to keep bringing up. He is a great big beast who's just a little over a year old. And as much as he would do it with the best of intent, if he was on a bar patio, he would be knocking tables over and jumping on people's laps and being a pain. We haven't trained him into a responsible public dog like that. But the bottom line is, leave it to the private market. That's all. Let them choose like anything else. Hey, we have a patio that allows dogs. Let that pub allow dogs. And there's a pub that could say, we don't want to allow it. Or you could have a no dog zone. There's all sorts of things, but it's just not the government's role to ban them. So every little step that allows a little more independent choice, I will always embrace. And I think it's great. So if you've got a responsible dog and you like sitting on a patio, bring your dog. I mean, there's a great website, showed dogs in a pub, I seem to remember, on Facebook or whatever, all sorts of pictures of dogs sidled right up to the bar. I mean, as long as you're not feeding the poor thing liquor, I didn't see a problem with that. I owned a bar for 5 years. I tell you, I had way more difficulty out of people than I could ever imagine having out of dogs. So I would have rather dealt with the dogs. BC Prairie Girl saying, what about cats? Don't discriminate. Yeah, I know, but come on, cats. So they just want to walk around and hate everybody on the patio. But I mean, fair enough. Bring a cat. I bring your budgie. I mean, as long as it's the choice of the business, you respect their choice. Bring it on. So either way, they're little things, but they're still important, and they are symbolic. Get government out of our face. I mean, so meanwhile, while the provincial government's getting rid of a law that was just kind of stupid anyways, because it wasn't a problem. They're just allowing dogs on patios for businesses that choose it. And those businesses can, interact with their own clientele and customers and find out what they like or what they don't. On the other hand, we've got the city of Calgary. Oh, yes, our fine luminaries in Calgary City Hall. So many municipal governments are like that. So they're working on smoking and vaping bans in city parks and along pathways. Like, this is just ridiculous, okay? This is a city hall that turns its head purposely the other way. Anybody going downtown lately? There's another gentleman I want to speak to. I hope I can get him on the show. He's been taking some very fantastic, actually, pictures of some of the unfortunate human calamity we've got with the addiction going on in downtown Calgary. But they want to turn their back on people shooting up in bus shelters. That's literally what they're doing. And people smoking meth on trains, because they are chasing down somebody who would vape in a park where it would dissipate in the air. And I don't vape or smoke. I mean, it doesn't affect me, but it's the freedoms thing. I don't care. I will actually speak up for other people's freedoms to do things. This is stupid. This is a solution looking for a problem. Where is the issue? I mean, I guess, you want some degree of courtesy. You don't want somebody to blast out a big mouthful of vapor while you're a foot away from them, because it's pretty much as close as you'll have to get a face full of that yourself. Smoking, yeah, it stinks a bit, but we're talking outdoors in parks. This is where the control freaks in city council are going, though. And it's ridiculous. Now, Courtney Penner, and she's we got the 2 Courtneys. I can't remember which one's which. They're both loony left. Penner is the female one. There's a male one. She says this would help limit the exposure of these behaviors to children. Now we get on to a term that we don't use enough these days, and that's social engineering. City Hall thinks it's their place to worry about what your kids see or don't see. Guys, it's not your friggin' business. I don't want to see little kids starting to smoke or vape either. But it's not the concern you have. Where do you stop with that idiocy? There's the biggest problem we have in municipal governments all the time. These self-important clowns who get elected into those municipal governments, they never stay within their jurisdiction. They never will just stick to what they're elected to do. They always have to go way out of bounds. Just like Jody Gondek wanted to get in on the lawsuit against Bill 21 in Quebec. Hey, Bill 21 is a disgusting bill, but it's not your place, Mayor Gondek. Worry about home here. That's not your issue. If you wanted to deal with C21, or not C21, but Quebec's Bill 21, run for federal office or even provincial, maybe, because you can go to a First Minister's meeting. But as a mayor, it's none of your business. Stay out of it. Or prior to that, with Minchie and a bunch of them, they spent months trying to ban fish soup in Chinatown. Guys, you got better things to do. But no, the big turning point now, again, we're going to let people overdose all over the streets, but we are worried about somebody vaping in a public park. Yeah, they got their priorities on straight. Okay, well, let's bring Reid Small in. He's the Western Standard BC reporter because he's always got lots of loony things in politics he can talk about as well, of course, because BC is the heartland of crazy politics. How's it going, Reid?
It's going very well, thank you.
Right on. So, yeah, I appreciate you coming on. You've been putting out a lot of stories where, expanding as the Western Standard, expanding our regional. We're not the Alberta Standard. We got to remind everybody, hey, we got some really good news content coming out of there, and you are the prime person in BC providing it. So thanks for coming in to talk to us a bit about your stories today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So I guess, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to start off by starting off with the staffing shortage in BC's healthcare system, which is not an exclusive problem to the province of BC, but rather pretty much the entire country. It's particularly bad in Western provinces. The East Coast hasn't been as bad, but BC has been particularly bad. Significant shortage of nurses, ER rooms closing for 12-hour periods at a time. 1 million British Columbians without access to a primary care practitioner. It's been, and again, this has been a slow building issue for many years, but the last couple of years have particularly accentuated the issue due to the pandemic.
Okay, yeah, you probably didn't catch the opening of the show, but that's what I started with a rant because Alberta has the same headline going on. We're short here. As you said, it's in the Western provinces predominantly. And part of that opening was I searched every province in Canada with doctor shortage, and every province shows, it's just a matter of degree on which ones are suffering more or less, but they're all short. And, it's getting acute. So we're not losing them necessarily to other provinces because every province is getting low. So we better start looking a little more carefully on how we're going to deal with this.
Yeah. Like the hospital in Clearwater, BC on Sunday, it closed for 12 hours. And that's the fifth time it's closed just this month overnight. And so patients were redirected an hour and 20 minutes drive to Kamloops. And this is only 2 days after a similar 12-hour closure at a hospital in Port McNeill. So it's really bad. And the province it says it's going to address the issue by bringing in more foreign trained nurses. So they're working on a marketing campaign to quote, make the province a more desirable location for foreign trained nurses. And they've allocated $12 million to streamlining the process of bringing in foreign trained nurses. Because usually it takes a couple of years to get licensed and registered to work in BC, but they're streamlining that process. And also they haven't provided a timeline on when they're going to allow the province's unvaccinated nurses to return to work.
Yeah, that's another big kind of elephant in the room for a lot of those people. We've got vaccine mandates hanging in some of the province or some of the health authorities or different facilities even. But it's getting pretty bad and showing almost the ideological hang up that it seems that some of these facilities have on vaccination when you're in the midst of a staffing crisis, but you still will not let the unvaccinated workers come back to work to ease it. And again, when it's been shown that at least the vaccination doesn't stop spread. So, it doesn't make a difference at this point. Guys, get off the horse and let these guys get back to work. I'd understand if vaccination stops spread. Okay, that's different. But how bad?
And there are multiple legal challenges in the courts right now, a few of which I'll be covering this week. And some are a little more promising than others. Some I would expect to be thrown out and not get anywhere. But there are some legal challenges underway that are being taken very seriously. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So getting on to some of your more recent stories as well. So there was a big meth bust. Unfortunately, we have the dubious honor of being the hosts of this guy, an Albertan. Looks like was trying to bring a massive amount of meth into BC there.
Man was hiking on Vancouver Island, or he claims he was hiking. according to American documents. And a man approached him who he had never met before, offered him $1,000 to drive a boat to Washington, spend the night, and then drive it back with what he called luggage. And he maintains that he did not know what was in that luggage. And so he supposedly, and according to these American documents, took the offer, stayed in a hotel for the night, returned to the boat the next day. On his way back, he was about half a mile from being back in Canada, and he was picked up by American officials. And now he's being investigated by Homeland Security, because the Americans certainly don't take these issues lightly when it comes to drug trafficking.
Yeah, just a side note, since there's a commenter, Gail, asking if I said the vax stops spreading. No, I said vaccination does not, in the case of COVID, just to clarify that. Because I get some people, you're a pro-vax, you're a monster, I'm unsubscribing, blah, blah, blah. No, not in this case. I'm still pro-vaccination, but I'm pro-choice. But no, I'm not trying to claim stuff spread. Okay, back to, I like to interact with the commenters. It's important. I mean, if something's unclear. But I mean, that amount of meth, I mean, BC's addiction crisis is even more acute than Alberta's right now. And 650 kilograms. I mean, aside from this guy's flaky defense or whatever, that's very, very potent drug. I mean, that's a massive amount that unfortunately could and would have killed and addicted a countless number of people. But that's just the one they caught.
Yeah, that's just the one they caught. I mean, as we all know, BC has a very, very significant drug problem. Lots of meth, mostly opiates, though. I mean, that's more than 150 people are dying every day in this province. Every month, rather. It's about 6 people a day dying from illicit drugs in BC. So, yeah, this is definitely contributing to that problem. Although it is meth, so less people are overdosing on that, but it's still contributing to violent crime and whatnot. The province is working on decriminalizing meth and cocaine and heroin and all of these hard drugs. They want to work on a decriminalization process and create what they call a safe supply, because in theory, according to the government, that will prevent the demand for the illicit drug trade.
Yeah, the government feels that the drug dealers are dangerous. So if the government gets into the drug business, they'll do it better, because they've always been really effective with that. I'm pretty sure there's no such thing as safe meth, but what do I know? Yeah. Thankfully, I don't take it. I mean, those poor people who get hooked on it. It's as you said, meth isn't the one that's typically causing the overdoses, but for those unfamiliar with a lot of addiction, meth is the one that kind of slowly eats them alive, though, when you see somebody so skinny and covered in sores and just sort of a walking zombie or freaking out. Often that's a matter of somebody's been on meth for a while. So it's more slow death than the fentanyl, but it's still a horrible death.
It's a common sight in Vancouver. It's all over the place on the downtown east side there. It's, people from out of town, they'll be walking in Gastown and they'll just walk the distance of 1 block, and suddenly it's like, like you're in a zombie movie.
Yeah, well, East Hastings in that area has always been notorious. I mean, even into the 80s, early 90s when we go out there, but I haven't been there in some years now, but I've heard it's gotten much worse even.
Absolutely. And I think that would actually be a good transition into the nearly $1 billion museum project that's going on in BC, because Liberal opposition Kevin Falcon has been criticizing the government for bringing forth this project while there is such a problem of drugs, violent crime, the nursing shortage, the doctor shortage. I feel like it's relevant to bring up. I've been covering quite a few stories on that since the news was announced earlier this month, and more will be coming.
So to frame that a bit, from what I know about this one, this is the big Royal BC Museum. They've basically declared the old one to be so colonial and so tainted and everything else that it just can't be salvaged. We got to get rid of it because it's inherently evil. And they're going to replace it with, well, they're saying, $800 million, but we know with government projects that'll probably come in well over $1 billion for, I'm just going to guess, to be a monument to wokeness.
Yeah, that was sort of the focal point to begin with, was more of an identity politic focus. But that's transitioned in response to criticism to a focus on the seismic danger. They're focusing on that it needs to be seismically upgraded, that it's prone to flooding, and that that it's riddled with asbestos. And they're saying that the proposal that they've set forth is actually $3 million. No, actually the number, yeah, $3 million cheaper than upgrading the existing building. So they might as well just tear it all down, build a new one. And Kevin Falcon said if he's elected as premier, he'll scrap the project. But according to the business case that the NDP government released last week, the demolition process will begin in March of 2024, which is 7 months prior to the next provincial election. So it won't make a difference. Even if he says he'll scrap it, by the time he gets into office, if he will, the building will already be torn down.
Yeah, and that's too bad because a lot could be lost. And as others are pointing out too, these are times when things are getting tight. I mean, Jennifer Schofield, a commenter, saying, try free rehab instead of free drugs. Well, you can spend a lot of money with $800 million on rehabilitation facilities. Or there was Cheryl, I think it was, brought up, $800 million could hire a heck of a lot of nurses back as well. Like as you wonder about the priorities with some things. But as you said, I mean, I can understand that some old buildings actually can't be rehabilitated or it's expensive. That happened in Calgary with the General Hospital. We had to blow it up. And, the left still goes wild about that. Oh, you blew up a hospital. This thing was so ancient and out of date, though, that it just wasn't worth fixing. That might be the case of the museum, but a lot of what we heard on shutting down the old one wasn't based on that. They're kind of pivoting. It was more, it's a symbol of colonialism and that sort of thing.
Right. And the business case that they released last week was heavily redacted. Much of it was blacked out. So we don't really have a lot of detail on it, just a timeline and a rough cost, which they maintain is still going to be significantly cheaper than seismically upgrading it. But a lot of people have pointed out, a lot of critics have also said that if you're going to be consistent with the need to seismically modernize buildings, then they should address the elementary schools that need to be seismically upgraded, because there's a bunch of schools in BC that are waiting for their funding to renovate for that exact reason. So that's what critics are saying, at least.
Well, again, yeah, it's a matter of priorities. I mean, it'd be horrible to see, but if Vancouver could, every seismologist says it could have a very big earthquake at some point. And I'd rather we deal with a bunch of squashed artifacts in a museum than a bunch of crushed children in a school. So
yeah,
first things first. So going a little further, I guess, getting onto municipal crazy governments, just seeing down your stories there, it looks like the Vancouver's looking to punish gas stations if they don't have electric vehicle charging setups.
Yeah, by 2025, Vancouver gas stations, right now they pay a business license fee of $253 a year. And that will raise to $10,000 a year in 2025, unless if they haven't put in one EV charging station of 50 kilowatts. And then commercial parking lots pay a slightly cheaper annual fee, and that will also be raised to $10,000 if they don't put in a minimum of 4 charging stations with a minimum of 26.6 kilowatts per station.
I can't imagine these stations are very cheap to install.
No, they're the gas stations are looking at a minimum of $100,000. The commercial lots are looking at $100,000. The gas stations are looking at least $130,000.
Yeah, and that really depends on the gas station. I mean, some might have a big parking area where perhaps they could find a couple appropriate spaces, but if you've got a small one, you might not even have room to stick that on your lot. And the other thing, I don't know about Vancouver, but we've got charging stations all over the city of Calgary. You can tell where they are because there's no cars in front of them.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And I forgot to mention the gas stations, regardless of the size, will have to will be subject to this coming policy. But commercial parking lots that have fewer than 60 parking stalls will be exempt.
Well, I guess that's a small relief. I mean, it's a big investment for a smaller parking lot, but still.
Yeah.
Wow,
it's part of Vancouver's climate emergency plan that was set forth in 2020, which aims to reduce the city's carbon emissions by 50% of 2007 levels by 2030. And also by 2030, it wants to ensure that 50% of all kilometers driven in the city of Vancouver are done so in zero emission vehicles.
Yeah, good luck with that. But well, I guess if they bankrupt enough people, there'll be a lot of people walking and riding bikes, and they won't be able to, make reach their targets that way. I just, well, you're in the land of the woke, I guess.
Yeah, that I am.
We're not immune. What we see in Vancouver this year is what's coming here in 3 years. So,
Yeah.
but, are there any court challenges pushing back on that again? I mean, this is the sort of thing that honestly, for some smaller businesses, could actually break them.
Pushing back on the EV charges.
Yeah.
Not that I'm aware of at this point. I haven't seen any court cases pushing back on that. Again, at least 60-70% of the gas stations already have chargers. I mean, it's become pretty widespread recently. So I don't know the exact number of how many gas stations do not have EV chargers in Vancouver right now, but they're definitely in the minority. I mean, there's not that many gas stations in the city to begin with. I think it's less than 70.
Oh, really? Okay. I get most are out towards getting into Abbotsford and Burnaby and all through there. There's certainly
66 to be exact.
Okay, so people kind of move more to the suburbs to fill up, anyways. But still, even a small amount being abused is too many in my view as far as businesses go. But okay, we'll wrap up with something a little more light and from the world of the bizarre. And you can see at the bottom of the story there, everybody's favorite transgender activist, Jessica Yanev, is her court's finished. She's been found guilty of assault.
Yep. She has been found guilty of assault. Jessica Yanev, formerly Jonathan Yanev, biological male, transitioned, goes by. Actually, she calls herself Jessica Simpson now. She legally changed her name to that.
Striking resemblance. I could see people getting that mixed up.
Yeah, I actually did genuinely get it messed up at first. I needed to be corrected. But yeah, so that court case wrapped up. That was a former Rebel News journalist, Kian Bext. He was covering a court case that Yanev was leaving from regarding weapons charges. So he started asking her questions. She then attacked him, and the camera went sideways, but you could see in the video that's embedded there, you could see what looks like punches were being thrown. And yeah, the judge did find Yanev guilty of assault. And Yanev will actually be in court again next month for, I don't know if you're familiar with Billboard Chris Elston. He travels around the country with a sign saying children cannot consent to puberty blockers. Yeah, he was also attacked by Yanev a couple of years ago, and that hearing will take place next month. So I'll be covering that.
Okay, well, as much as we kind of look at it as a bit of dark comedy, honestly, it appears that Miss Yanev has some mental issues to be dealt with. I hope actually perhaps in sentencing they can get her some help, because she's actually got some serious problems going on, that one. But it's hard not to turn away from that accident sometimes as you're watching it go. So for her sake and everybody else, hopefully this is a closure and moving on to a better part of her life, I guess. So before I let you go, is there anything you're working on you want to let us know about, or things coming up?
Yeah, just stay tuned for decisions that will be coming out regarding constitutional challenges to previous COVID-related orders. A lot of those are concluding in a close time frame right now. So we're going to be expecting a big decision possibly this week. Within a couple of weeks at the latest, regarding the legality of the vaccine passport system in BC. Chief Justice of the Supreme Court he'll be releasing his decision on whether it was constitutionally sound in the coming days.
Great. Well, we're looking forward to it. So thanks for that extended update on the Wet Coast there, Reid. Always good to talk to you, and keep up the good work.
Likewise. Thanks very much, Cory.
Okay, thanks, Reid. So yes, that was the Western Standard's Reid Small. He's our BC person on the ground. As you can see, he covers a lot of these stories, and he digs out some good ones out there. But again, that crazy province does provide for a lot for us all the time, same as well. I saw, just getting back, I guess, to a little of that chat with the electric vehicles and charging. Wild Rose, there was a commenter asking how much does it cost to charge an electric car. I saw somewhere somebody tweeting recently that's saying it's cost $7 in electricity. I'm not sure. But, something some people got to understand, especially proponents of this all electrifying everything and moving forward and against the left. So they've always got that mental deficit when it comes to supply and demand. That if you put all of these vehicles electric, if you electrified the world the way they want to, in Vancouver, they've also been talking about, and we see in other areas, banning natural gas from heating and cooking in houses. So we'd make everything for heat and cooking electric, and we make every vehicle electric, and we put all of that into the mix. We take out all of the all of the petrochemically driven power. So, natural gas and diesel and coal, get rid of all that. What do you think is going to happen to the price of electricity? This is something they just will not acknowledge and do not understand. We don't even have a fraction of the generating and transmission capacity and infrastructure required right now to handle all of this. That's part of what these idiots in Vancouver are trying to do with their city council, I guess, in the sense that we could force gas stations and parking lots to put the charging stations in. Okay, that's one of the steps that's keeping people out of electric cars, because it's a real pain in the butt, I would imagine, if you're traveling around in one of those very expensive virtue signaling machines and you can't find a practical charging place for your vehicle. So the more that are there, perhaps more people will choose electric. But the generating cost is going to go through the roof. And, these hipsters who live downtown and in urban areas say, it doesn't matter to me anyways. I walk to work or ride my bike or whatever it might be. Well, you still need to turn your lights on. You still need to heat your place, even in Vancouver. You still need to cook your food. All of those things are going to go up. Everything will go up. When the price of power goes up, everything goes up. It's just about the only commodity we have that the price of it impacts everything. So when you want to get your January avocados for your toast, they're going to cost you a whole lot of money because you're getting them up here and you guys have shut down all the efficient power sources around yourself. This is madness going towards electrifying everything, and that's the only way to put it. We got Site C Dam up in northern BC. I see Jennifer just brought it up. Yeah. When she's saying it's more to generate power for China, I don't know, whatever. The bottom line is in that one, though, it's got massive opposition from left and right. And that's just one dam. You guys are going to need, in BC alone, probably 15 more dams like that if you really want to make everything electric. We want to get every gas-powered vehicle off the road. We want to get every natural gas heated home out of there. We want to get rid of every other form of generation. You can barely get Site C done. And then what about Alberta, Saskatchewan? We don't have any giant rivers out here like they have in Quebec or even in Manitoba that we could dam up and make a massive hydroelectric project. Nuclear, people fight that tooth and nail. Where do we go with this? Solar? How many hundreds and hundreds of square miles and how many billions and billions of dollars for something that's going to run out on us if we have a long stretch of cold weather and cloudy days? It's madness. It's madness. And meanwhile, they're punishing these businesses. Again, gas station owners, people got to realize, it's Imperial, who cares? Well, it's a franchise, guys. These are small business owners usually who run those stations. And if you suddenly hit them with an extra expensive, as Reid was saying, $100,000, $130,000 just to put a charging port in that people aren't going to use very often. We know that. As I said, I was only half kidding. If you want to find electric charging ports, it's easy to find them because nobody's parked in front of them. Don't need them. Then where are we going to go? So something's got to give. They've either got to really allow some realistic, massive infrastructure growth, which means, and I know Wild Rose doesn't like it, but too bad, nuclear. It means that. It means hydro, but we don't have enough hydro here for it. Solar is just not reasonable. Wind doesn't blow all the time. And we haven't even started surveying where we're going to put these facilities because they're not coming. So we're shutting down all our stuff and we haven't created the alternative yet. What a stupid, stupid direction we're going in. And we're all going to pay a terrible, terrible price for this in the long run. Man, I just fear for the idiocy of what we're doing right now. But I'll keep ranting about it. At least it gives me lots of material to get the vein pulsing. Let me talk about one of our sponsors before I get on to some more news stuff. And I got a fair amount to go through today. And that is Bitcoin Well. These guys, again, they're our original sponsor. They're a great one. I'll talk quickly about that other program we have with Bitcoin Well. And it's a neat one too. If you might want to consider it in your workplace, ask your employer to put it in place. Or if you're an employer, think about doing it for your employees. We have at the Western Standard, we can choose. It's voluntary, of course, too. And a percentage of our salary gets paid in Bitcoin, a small amount, but that's fine. And again, it's voluntary. And then that percentage gets matched by the Western Standard. So every month, A little chunk actually goes into a side savings over there in a Bitcoin wallet. And Bitcoin Well facilitates that and sets it all up. So it's just a different little way to save a few more bucks and in something else outside of the regular currency. They have all sorts of ways to help you set up. And I mean, of course, they got savings plans that you can set up just all on your own as well, and automatic deposits from your bank. They got ATMs all through the West where you could, you got a few bucks extra cash. Hey, throw it onto your Bitcoin account. Too many of these tongue twister sponsors. I need easier ones to pronounce. But they make it really practical and bring it home for you. They help you can pay your utility bills with Bitcoin or all sorts of things. Check them out, bitcoinwell.com, a good Western Canadian company, and see if it is for you. Take control of your money. All right, let's see what else we got me to get worked up in the news. Dave mentioned this earlier. This is odd. Yeah, so the CMHC, that's the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. I do despise when government, it's one of their ways to hide what they're doing. We see it in the city of Calgary too, when they make these arm's length, quote unquote, corporations. Look, they're arms and branches of the government. And what it does is make it harder to account for what the hell they're doing. The CMHC, I believe, is still, you can still FOIP them and you can still get some information and they still answer to the government a bit. In Calgary, they put together a $100 million slush fund and they called it Calgary Economic Development. Give it this nice name, made it sound as if it's some sort of things like a Chamber of Commerce or something. And no, it's a bunch of bureaucrats with a slush fund. Subsidizing and giving money to buddies to start failing businesses in Calgary and put pressure on existing businesses who are already having a hard time. And because they set this side thing with the Calgary Economic Development with that, even though it was tax dollars, suddenly we can't even find out what exactly they're doing with it. We can't audit them, can't FOIP them. Either way, the CMHC is an arm of the federal government, the Canadian Mortgage Housing Corporation. And they deal with our housing things. Now, they over and over and over again keep doing these studies on behalf of the government to try and tax our primary home equity. They want your house, guys. They want to take the money out of your house. And every time they get caught doing it, they say, no, we're not doing that yet. They keep spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars going after it. And now the head of it is saying we need home prices to stall. This is from an access to information thing from the Taxpayers Federation. The CEO of that group said, welcome tips from the equity tax advocates. Again, these guys, how can we tax these houses to stall the growth of the price? They refuse to acknowledge the reality, as I was talking about, loony lefties, mental disconnect guy, there's a little chunk in their brains somewhere. There's a little piece of meat, gray matter in there, and that's where supply and demand resides, right? Where you can figure out that concept and how that works. And somehow in the left, it's not there. It's not there. And Hayek, said it best, that fantastic economist, when he said, if socialists understood economics, they wouldn't be socialists. But you see, the socialists are missing that little chunk wherever it is. It was lobotomized in vitro or something like that. So either way, they're mystified with the CMHC. How do we get housing prices under control? How do we get it affordable? They think taxing it's the way to do it. No, we need more. Isn't that complicated? If you don't have enough houses and you got too many people want them, the price goes up. Supply and demand. Remember that little chunk of meat? Think about it, guys. Not the CMHC. So yeah, this was an email that came out, again, the Taxpayers Federation. I love how they dig this stuff out on our behalf a lot. And this email is by Paul Kershaw, U of BC researcher. He got $450,000 from the CMHC to promote a home equity tax. Yeah, the one that they say they don't want, but they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars trying to promote it. Weird. But yes, they think somehow this, if we can just tax ourselves, we'll all get rich from it, and we'll slow down housing costs. Maybe because everybody will be broke eventually, and nobody will want to buy a house because they're going to steal your equity from you, and then we'll just live in tents down in Vancouver's east side, I guess. Getting back to what Dave talked a bit about in the story too. So yeah, drug dealers are moving online. Black market drug dealers are selling more pot pound for pound than the federally licensed distributors. So, it's been legal. Pot's been legalized for some years now in Canada, but the black market is still outdoing them. A couple of reasons. I mean, most of it is, again, when you get government involved, nothing's efficient. Only government could screw up something as simple as selling some weed to make some money. And they've managed to do it. So, I mean, most of it is that if you want to go the legal route of selling pot, the amount of regulation and licensing and studies and forms and people and infrastructure and crap that you got to do, it's almost impossible to compete with the guy was already set up with his basement hydroponics setup, who was growing fantastic pot 10 years ago. So again, like just about everything else where we got a problem, Government just needs to get out of the damn way. Get out of the way. Now, it gets back to what Reid was talking about, because there's that push there to somehow have the government. Now, if there's decriminalization, I kind of understand that when it comes to meth, heroin, and coke. I'm not saying that we want to spread it around. But the bottom line is there's no sense charging somebody because they had a gram in their pocket because they're a user. You're not solving anything. You're just taking up resources. Try and get the person who sold them the gram of meth. I believe you get after those dealers and everything. But if you think the government's going to get in and become a better meth dealer than the existing ones, they can't even sell pot right. Come on. Coke and fentanyl and whatever else. I mean, the problem isn't, well, I mean, there is a problem with bad drugs and unclean drugs and things that are killing people. Absolutely. But the bigger problem, we've got to get to the bottom of it, is the addiction in the first place. At best, if the government gets in and provides clean, reliable, safe drugs, as I said, there's no safe meth. At best, you're going to slow the death. I guess that's better if you're going to hope to get them off it. But if you're not treating them getting it off it, then all you're doing is facilitating a slow suicide. And again, you won't do it any better than the criminal drug dealers anyways, even with the harder drugs. So yeah, I can understand reprioritizing. Like I said, I wouldn't want to see police wasting time, even here in Calgary, sweeping down the street. It's not that hard. You see all the strung out junkies laying around all over the place, the poor buggers. I mean, you want to go around and pin them down and handcuff them and rifle through their pockets and find that they're in, because technically it's illegal. So they're probably almost all in possession of some degree of the illegal drugs, but it's not helping anybody going after those guys. That's what decriminalization is about. Just quit wasting time on them, but you could still focus on the illicit dealers. And don't focus on the illicit dealers by trying to replace them. Do it by trying to knock them out of business. And getting back to supply and demand, hey, again, the chunk of meat in the head. The demand is there. As long as those guys are addicted, they're going to keep asking for it, and somebody's going to provide it. So let's get on to treatment and reduce the demand. If you reduce the demand, the supply takes care of itself. But no easy solutions. There aren't. But you know, we've got a lot of crappy solutions being proposed out there. Yeah, this was an odd one now. So let's see. Yeah, Katie Telford. She's Trudeau's chief of staff. Been a lot of other rumors about her among things too, but whatever. She got VIP tickets. Dave mentioned that, to the White House Correspondents Association dinner. And she was boasting that she could manipulate press coverage. So, oh, wait a minute. Yeah. So a contractor paid to host her. This is how, again, entrenched and corrupt and dirty our government's getting, is roundabout ways. So, I mean, you can't necessarily, though actually you can, I should see, you can take the prime minister to an island offshore and spend millions of dollars on him or whatever it might have been and get away with it, because they will still spank him technically, but it doesn't matter because he'll get reelected and he doesn't actually get charged with anything. So also you can bribe his, give incentives to his chief of staff and have her attend VIP dinners in Washington. These are the sort of things, as Dave was mentioning, this is the social event of the year in Washington. So yeah, there's people like Drew Barrymore and Arthur Stewart. That's a funny name of the bunch. I mean, she knows about doing time. Brooke Shields, the celebrities, the heavyweights all get going down there. And I mean, if Telford wanted to go to it, fine. If she managed to get an invite somehow, fine. But when you get a business source who's buying that access for her, well, we got a bit of a problem. And who else was down there? Oh, Kim Kardashian. I'm glad we can have our federal people, rubbing shoulders with important ones like this. So when she's whispering in Trudeau's ear after one of their intimate policy discussions, she can talk about how she met Kim Kardashian and Pete Davidson at the red carpet affair down south, because God knows we don't want Trudeau thinking about actual policy issues now, do we? That's our government at work. I guess there is a conflict of interest investigation looking into it, so we'll see if anything comes of that. I won't hold my breath. I guess even some new Democrat MPs are condemning the Supreme Court decision. That's where lifetime imprisonment without parole is now considered unconstitutional. That's where our Supreme Court has basically decided, you know what, we're going to give volume discounts to mass murderers. That's the reality, right? You only pay a certain price for killing one, and after that, hey, it's a free-for-all, because you'll serve the time for every one of them after that, all at the same time. It'll all be concurrent sentence. So you get sentenced to 10 years, per person you killed, but if you killed 20 people, you serve them all at the same time. So, 10 years, 2/3 mandatory release, be nice, do some counseling. Yeah, you got 3-4 years. Even some of the NDP have figured out this is stupid. But that's where we're sitting right now. Yes, and this was a 9-0 court ruling. There wasn't even dissent. What does it take? How bad? I mean, the one that people were pointing at the most was, of course, that monster who murdered those people in a mosque who were just praying. And now that person's got the volume discount on murder, so that he'll probably be out in a little while. I mean, it still might be 25 years. That's still too short for murdering 6 people. And, we've got others who really deserve to die of old age in jail. And our judges in Canada, unfortunately, don't think so. So we're busy again. Where are our priorities? Well, we're banning vaping in parks, and we're fining gas stations who don't put in electric chargers, and we're releasing murderers. Let's see. Other stuff. We got, I'm hoping to get a guy on from University of Saskatchewan to talk about this one. And that's the wild boars that are coming in Alberta. Now, Lamont. Now, you got to think, if you know Alberta, that's getting just over from Elk Island National Park. So it's just east of Edmonton a little bit. Like, this is getting pretty urban, and they're having a problem with wild boars getting into there. And for people, you're hearing little bits about this, but if you haven't been to the southern states, like I used to do a lot of work down there as a surveyor in oil exploration through Texas and Louisiana, even in New Mexico, I saw some of it. The wild pigs down there, these feral pigs, they are out of control and they do damage. Like, when you see a field, when those things have been rooting around, they rip it to shreds, and they're tough to get. There's traps everywhere. These guys are hunting them everywhere. It doesn't matter. These things are smart. They can eat darn near anything. They breed faster than all get out. And now we've got them up here. So I don't even know if we can get them under control even at this point. But maybe if we got any chance of getting them under control, it'd be now when their population isn't that big. But if they get in and entrench, guys, you can't get those bloody things out, and they do a lot of damage. Okay, well, let's see. So let's tune in tomorrow. I've got Matt Hadfield. He's from the Open Media. There was a story a little while that broke about government's been sharing data from online learning on students, the kids. The kids have had their personal data shared with data marketers and things like that. They were forced into online learning through the pandemic and regulations. Now it turns out with the apps they brought in and things like that, basically their data, your kids' data got sold to data marketers. That's going to be a big deal to talk about with it. So we're going to talk to him about online privacy in general and things like that with Open Media. And and I got Tom Flanagan coming on. Is it tomorrow? No, it's Wednesday. Can't remember. I got somebody else good coming on tomorrow too. Geez, I should have brought my schedule in with me. Either way, guys, it'll be good. Thanks for tuning in today. I hope you had a good weekend. Let's have a good week here. Monday has been kicked off. So I will see you all again tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. and I'll know who my guest is by then.